Hi, Deacon Ron here. I'd like to spend a couple of videos looking at the idea of biblical faith. What does the Bible mean when it talks about faith? And I want to do this by looking at heroes of faith that the Bible gives us. Looking at stories about people who had faith. People like Abraham, Moses, Peter, Mary, Jesus, King David. First thing I want you to notice is that all of these people, except for Mary and Jesus, were sinful, ordinary people. Abraham was a liar and deceiver. Moses was a murderer. David was an adulterer. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So why does the Bible hold these people up as models of faith? Well, because they all believed, they still believe that despite their faults and failings, God had chosen them, God had called them, and God had given them a set purpose, a set goal, a set meaning, and they all obeyed God to the best of their ability. So the first person I want to look at is Abraham. Abraham is considered the father of faith in the 3 great monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So they all recognize that there is something essential about this man, something very important about this man. He defines what it means to be a human being according to the Bible. So let's read how the story begins in Genesis chapter 12. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abraham went as the Lord had told him. So the first thing I want you to notice here is that God called Abraham. This was God's initiative. The Lord said to Abraham. This wasn't Abraham's idea. So the initiative comes from God. In the Bible, the initiative always has to come from God. And what is Abraham being asked to do? To leave his country, his father's household, his people. In other words, to leave his comfort zone, leave his securities, leave where he feels safe and happy, and to go into an unknown future, a future that God had prepared for him. This was what God always does. He comes into our lives. He calls us. He chooses us. And then he gives us a goal. He gives us a direction. For Abraham, this was known as the promised land. The promised land is within us. The promised land is within. Jesus called it the kingdom of God. Paul called it Christ. And what does Abraham have to do? He has to make a great sacrifice in order to achieve that goal. He had to trust God. He had to show great trust in God by giving up all that he was familiar with and all that he was comfortable with, leaving all that behind him to head towards the future that God was calling him, that God was going to show him. And this idea of sacrifice comes up again in the story of Abraham with the story of his son Isaac. God promised Abraham that he was going to be the father of a great nation. Abraham had no children. He was old and his wife was barren. Eventually, his wife gives birth to Isaac. Isaac grows up to become a little boy. And what does God do? He tells Abraham to sacrifice his son. And Abraham is prepared to do that. He takes the son up the mountain. Just before he plunges his knife in his heart, God stops him. Now, this seems to us a barbaric story because it's dealing with human sacrifice. But back in the time when this story was written, human sacrifice was part of the ancient cultures. But anyway, the story is trying to teach us or show us, are we prepared to give up even that which is most precious to us in order to fulfill our destiny, in order to work towards the goal that God has given us? This is the essence of faith. So Abraham obeyed God. Abraham put his trust in God. He trusted that God had called him. God was going to show him this land. God was going to take care of him. God was going to help him fulfill his destiny. And because of that faith, because of that trust, Abraham was going to bring blessings into the world. This is the essence of biblical faith. A good example of biblical faith, I think, can be found in the life of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She was a nun working in India in a school teaching the children of wealthy Indians. She was comfortable, she loved teaching, her students loved her, and one day while she was in a train going on a retreat, she heard the call of Jesus to go and to begin to care for the poorest of the poor in India. Again, she heard the call of Jesus. She didn't go to help the poor because they were poor. She helped them because God had called her. Christ was calling her to do this. She wasn't just a social worker. She was a missionary of charity. So she leaves her teaching. She leaves her comfortable convent and begins one by one caring for the sick and the dying on the streets of Calcutta. She didn't know where she was going to sleep that night. She didn't know where she was going to get her next meal, but she left her comfortable past to be obedient to the will of God. This is biblical faith. So the question I want to leave you with is, where in your life do you think God is calling you? What in your life do you think God is asking you to leave behind, to give up? How is God calling you to leave your comfort zone and your securities and your safeties? God is always pushing you. God is always pushing you to reach your full potential. What is the goal God has given you? What is the destiny God has given you? Be obedient to that call. Put your faith in God, trust in God, and you will bring blessings to the world through your life. Thank you for listening.